Asia is the biggest continent in the world and has so many ethnically diverse people, from the Arabs to the Yeniseians. But Asia also has so many natural resources, such as minerals and spices, that not only the Asians used, but they were wanted by a continent to the west of Asia to thrive economically. Trade between Asia and Europe started when the Greeks, under Alexander the Great, reached as far as India. Since then, they traded for economic growth. Meanwhile, the Europeans were learning more about Asia through the Crusades and the adventures of Marco Polo. This intensified the desire to conquer Asia as they found out more about its wonders. But suddenly, free trade between Europe and Asia stopped when the Turks, an ethno-linguistic group that lives on the Asian side of the Asia-Europe border, didn't allow most of Europe to trade. Only those from certain Italian city-states were allowed to trade with the Turks. Therefore, the Italians sold Asian goods at high prices. This made everyone else want a new trading route to Asia through the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The first country to do the imperialism game were Spain and Portugal, whose people wanted to go to India and the Spice Islands, also known as Malucca, both rich in spices. To avoid competition, Portugal went east and Spain went west. Spain discovered and conquered Latin America and the Philippines instead of India and Malucco. Portugal, however, reached India and Malucco and settled there, gathering spices. Next, the Netherlands, France, and Great Britain joined the bandwagon and started to set bases in India, kicking out the Portuguese. Netherlands also kicked the Portuguese from Indonesia, putting bases there. Soon, all of the colonizers were fighting amongst themselves who will conquer what. Soon, all of Southeast Asia, except for Thailand, which served as buffer state, and South Asia, under the British, were under colonial rule. Meanwhile, the colonizers, along with Russia, Japan, and Germany, were scrambling over Chinese spheres of influence. But what about the Asians themselves? What happened to them? They were oppressed by the colonial leaders who served only their interests and of their home country. The leaders led lavish lifestyles and plundered from their lands. So they decided to protest against the government. The Asians wanted independence from their European masters. In China, the Qing dynasty failed to block Westerners from invading, which caused the people to not only revolt against the Westerners, but also against the Qing. Japan, an Asian country, started to become an imperial power like the Europeans and America, having created the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Much of the people in the uncolonized parts of Asia, which were under the control of Muslim-oriented countries such as the Ottoman Empire and Persia, wanted a secular state for themselves. Some countries gained independence from peaceful reforms in the country. Examples were India, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Singapore. But when those reforms weren't made, the countries made violent revolts against their masters. Examples are Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Myanmar, and China. Whatever the method though, the Asians were proud of having defeated known world powers. After World War II, the Westerners gave up most of their colonies in Asia in the process of decolonization. However, they were only politically free. Culturally, and more so economically, the Westerners didn't really let go of their colonies. The Asian countries were free to rule themselves, but their culture was different from their culture when the Europeans first landed on their shores. One example is the Philippines, which became very friendly to the United States. And the Philippines' first years of as an independent country, it was a client state to the US. Economically, many Asian countries, with only a few exceptions, were weaker than the country that imperialized them. This became the basis of a concept called neocolonialism. The Westerners didn't really want to let go fully of their colonies, like parents who always want their children to stay with them for life. However, Asia is economically developing fast since the late 20th century, with the biggest economic growth from China, Japan, India, and South Korea, to name a few. In fact, China has the second biggest economy in the world, only behind the United States of America. The 21st century is also sometimes called the Asian century, and we Asians should be proud of it. And traditional festivals and traditions keep the culture alive.